Worth had always been presented to Ophelia Valewood as a ledger line: pain endured, quietly counted as virtue; hunger survived without complaint counted as discipline; obedience under cruelty counted as loyalty. The river fort taught this arithmetic until it felt like law carved into bone. Yet law had teeth, and teeth eventually turned inward. The crux of her life was no longer whether she could survive another season in chains of duty, but whether silence itself had become the instrument that would erase her. On the night she ran, she understood with cold clarity that endurance was not noble when it delivered you neatly to your execution. Rain hit the fort walls in slanted sheets, carrying the sour smell of wet wool, iron hooks, and river mud that never truly dried. Ophelia stood in the records annex with her sleeves rolled to the elbow, knuckles raw from scrubbing wax strips off counting boards. Her shift had begun before dawn and should have ended at moonrise, but bonded laborers did not measure time by bells. They measured it by commands. "Faster," Overseer Brand said without looking up from his tally slate. "Council carts leave at first light. If your hands are idle, I can find harder work for them." His voice was smooth, almost bored, which always frightened her more than shouting. Around them, other workers moved in silence between stacked grain seals, bound crates, and law scrolls wrapped in oilcloth. Iron rings fixed to the floor marked where prisoners were chained during audits. Tonight, 2 rings were occupied. A gray-haired woman and a boy of maybe 18 sat with wrists bound, accused of hiding a measure of millet. The woman had stopped crying hours ago. The boy still shook. Brand tapped the edge of Ophelia's station with a rod. "Did you hear me, Valewood?" "I heard." "Use full answer." "Yes, Overseer." He smiled then, mild as winter sun. "Better." The lash scars across Ophelia's back had closed into thin raised lines months earlier, but damp weather woke each one like a memory. Her shoulders burned when she reached for the upper shelves. Her left ankle still stiffened from a chain fall in spring. Hunger sat in her belly like a stone, heavy and ordinary. Nothing about tonight should have been different. Then Council Auditor Kestra arrived with a locked iron case and 3 wolf guards in dark cloaks, and the whole annex shifted around her presence the way grass bent under sudden wind. Kestra rarely came down to labor floors. She dealt in decrees, not dust. She set the case on Brand's desk and gave him a folded order stamped in black wax. "Special inventory," she said. "No one enters. No one leaves. I need 1 scribe with clean hands and no family ties." Brand looked around the room and chose her instantly. "Valewood. She reads and keeps her mouth shut." Kestra's gaze moved over Ophelia the way one inspected a tool for hidden cracks. "Can she copy old script?" "Yes." "Good. If she asks questions, remove her tongue." The words landed with the same casual weight as asking for more lamp oil. Brand dipped his head once, as if discussing weather. Ophelia carried the case to the inner archive, where stone walls held the day's chill, and cedar smoke from the brazier clung low under the ceiling. Kestra unlocked the case herself. Inside lay 3 bound ledgers, old enough that the leather had gone pale at the spine. Royal registry marks were stamped beneath newer council seals, half scraped, half hidden. That detail snagged Ophelia's attention in spite of herself. Kestra laid out a sheet. "You will copy names and death dates from this volume only. No additions, no omissions. If your pen hesitates, I will assume disobedience." Ophelia nodded and set to work. The script was formal court hand from before the fort became a labor hold. She copied line by line while rain rattled the shutters. At first, it looked like burial accounting from the old Civil War. Then the pattern emerged. Infant heirs listed as stillborn in 3 provinces on the same moon cycle, maternal lines extinguished within days, witnesses marked as deceased who later appeared in supply rosters under council salaries. A falsified purge, systematic, deliberate. Her pulse began to hammer in her throat. She kept writing. She kept her breathing even. She did not look surprised. She was dust. She was ink. She was the quiet girl they forgot when they made plans in front of her. If she lifted her eyes, Kestra would see that she understood. If she paused, Bran would ask why her hand shook. She had to keep copying. She had to keep the letters neat. She only had to survive this hour, then the next. The truth was right there, black on cream, and truth had gotten better people buried in lime pits. But if those names were real, then someone had made children vanish on paper before they vanished in life. Someone had profited from erasing bloodlines. If they knew she could read this, she became a loose thread. Loose threads got cut. Kestra watched her for 2 hours, then left to confer in the corridor. Bran took her place. He smelled of damp leather and stale ale. "You look pale," he said softly. "Do not faint on state records. It is disrespectful. I am fine. You are useful, when fine." He leaned close enough for her to see old scar tissue at his jawline. "You were purchased cheap, Valewood. Do not mistake that for mercy. Cheap goods are easy to discard." By the last market bell, thunder had moved east and the annex lamps burned low. Kestra returned with another official, a narrow-faced clerk Ophelia had seen once at sentencing tables. They assumed she was too focused to listen. She lowered her head and sharpened her quill. "Transfer list at dawn," the clerk murmured. 3 laborers reassigned to quarry detail, 1 to the docks, 1 disposal. "Disposal reason?" Kestra asked. "Unauthorized literacy exposure." A pause. Paper sliding. Seal pressed. Kestra said, "Burn her cot. Mark fever death." The clerk gave a brief, humorless laugh. "Always fever." Bootsteps retreated. Bran remained at the door, whistling under his breath. Ophelia finished the page without blotting ink. Her fingers had gone numb. When Bran finally dismissed her, the corridor outside the archive felt too bright, too loud, every torch flare edged in threat. She carried scrap papers to the refuse brazier, past the holding rings where the gray-haired woman now sat alone, and kept walking because stopping would mean shaking. In the bunk hall, she knelt by her cot, touched the straw mattress, and understood she would never sleep there again. The breaking point was not a dramatic revelation, but an administrative line item. Disposal reason: unauthorized literacy exposure. Her name reduced to procedure. Her death scheduled between grain tallies and route stamps. She moved fast after that, though speed in the fort required disguise. Panic drew attention. Routine passed unseen. She borrowed a kitchen pail and walked to the scullery with her usual limp. She traded half her bread ration for a wax stub and thread. She slipped into the laundry shed, removed the iron labor tag from her collar, and stitched it into the hem of a spare apron. If guards checked, they would find a tag, not realize it was not attached to her throat. She wrapped her hair tighter, smudged ash across her cheekbones, and stole a dock runner's cloak still wet from rain. The hardest part was returning to the archive. 2 sentries stood post at the outer stair, bored and arguing over dice marks carved into a crate. She lowered her head and carried a stack of empty ledgers as if on assignment. One guard squinted. "You are late, girl. Annex closed." "Overseer said burn Miskopi sheets before damp ruins them," she answered, lifting the ledgers a little. "If they mold, he flays us all." The guard grimaced. Bran's temper was common knowledge. "Go, be quick." Inside, the annex had gone nearly dark. Only the brazier in the inner room glowed. Ophelia set down the blank ledgers and forced herself not to run. Kestra's iron case was gone, but the old registry volume remained on the desk, likely left for morning recataloging. She stared at it for one suspended heartbeat. Taking it was treason layered on theft. Leaving it was death with cleaner paperwork. She slid the ledger beneath her cloak and tied it flat against her ribs with the waxed thread. The leather edge pressed into bruised skin. She welcomed the pain. It meant the evidence was real. A door slammed in the corridor. Voices. Bran and someone else, closer than expected. Ophelia crossed to the brazier, dropped a handful of scrap into the coals, and lifted one burning page with tongs so smoke filled the room. When Bran opened the door, she coughed hard, eyes watering for truth and performance both. Damp sheets, she rasped, would not catch. Bran waved smoke away. Idiot girl, you are done. Return to bunk hall. Yes, overseer. She passed him with shoulders bent, each step measured. The ledger felt like a second pulse against her side. She did not go to the bunk hall. Instead, she cut through the grain vault, down the ramp to lower cistern tunnels where runoff drained toward the river gates. The air there was colder, thick with algae and old stone. Rats scattered from her lantern. Twice she heard patrols above and flattened against slime-slick walls until footsteps faded. At the final sluice, she found the grate half-rusted exactly where she remembered from childhood maintenance duty. She wedged the tongs between bars and pushed until metal screamed. One bar snapped free. River water surged black beneath her. She dropped to her knees, slid through the opening, and landed waist-deep in current that stole her breath. The cold was a blade. She clutched the ledger under her cloak with one arm and kicked for the outflow channel, scraping elbows on rock. Behind her, a horn sounded from the fort. Then a second. They had found the empty cot. She emerged half a mile downriver amid reeds and driftwood, coughing water, shaking uncontrollably. Night wind cut through wet cloth. Somewhere uphill, watchhounds began to bay. She did not allow herself to collapse. She staggered toward the market outpost lights in the distance, each step a decision renewed. Keep moving. Keep the ledger dry. Do not die before someone sees what was done. By dawn, she would need sanctuary, law, witness, or miracle. She had none of those yet. Only stolen truth strapped to her ribs and the first thin, terrifying taste of choosing her own life. Only stolen truth strapped to her ribs and the first thin, terrifying taste of choosing her own life carried Ophelia up the muddy rise toward the market outpost, where lanterns swung from crooked poles and painted circles marked neutral trading ground between packs that trusted coin more than treaties. Her wet boots slipped twice in the clay. Each stumble sent a hot stitch of pain through her side where the ledger was tied tight against her skin. Behind her, far downriver, horns answered one another across the dark like hunting calls. The outpost gate was little more than 2 timber posts and a chain that could be dropped in seconds. But 6 armed wolves stood there under oiled cloaks, scanning the road with the flat focus of men paid to notice fear. She forced her breathing to slow and joined a cluster of late traders guiding mule carts toward inspection. Wet wool, frying onions, horse sweat, and wood smoke struck her all at once. The ordinary smell of other lives almost broke her. A guard caught her sleeve as she passed. Tag. She let her shoulders sag as if from labor, not terror, and showed the frayed collar edge where the iron plate should have hung. Lost in the flood channel. He frowned. Flood channel where? Lower cistern spillway. She coughed, rough and real. Overseer Bran will dock 3 weeks' rations if I do not report to intake by dawn. At Bran's name, the guard grimaced with immediate sympathy and disgust. Riverfort stock. Keep left, labor shelter is the low hall. No theft, no fighting, no howling in my square. She dipped her head and moved on, pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Inside the palisade, the market spread in tight lanes of canvas stalls and plank sheds, torches mirrored in puddles, voices low and urgent beneath weather shutters. A chalked boundary line cut across the center yard around a wide iron brazier set on carved stones. Moon witness fire. She had seen it once as a child from a distance, when 2 clans settled a debt marriage at sunrise. The memory arrived with dangerous clarity. Under witness law, a declared mate pair could claim temporary sanctuary from seizure until dawn review, because pacts that ignored moon witness invited blood feud. It was old law, inconvenient law, but still law. She pressed herself into shadow beside a grain cart and looked for someone strong enough to make the claim stand for one night. Not a drunk trader, not a dock boss, an alpha or a wolf dangerous enough that others would hesitate. A commotion rippled at the North Lane entrance. 3 riders in dark cloaks dismounted together, all carrying council badges tied high on their shoulders. Bounty wolves. She recognized the clipped braid on the lead female, one of Kestra's enforcers from sentencing days. The woman handed a rolled notice to the gate captain and pointed toward the labor sheds. Ophelia's mouth went dry. She moved deeper into the crowd and almost collided with a man standing alone at a butcher's awning, broad-shouldered, motionless in a way that made everyone else seem restless. A scar tracked from his temple to his jaw beneath 2 days of dark stubble. Rain had soaked his black coat to charcoal, but he wore it like armor, straight-backed, watchful. 2 younger wolves lingered half a step behind him with the same insignia stitched at the collar, a split stone crest she did not recognize, old and repaired with silver thread. Not Riverfort. Not Council. His gaze flicked to her once, taking in the torn hem, the river mud, the shaking hands she could not quite still. He smelled faintly of cedar and storm rain, clean beneath the market grime, like a forest after lightning. Something in her chest tightened on instinct, not fear exactly, not safety either, a low thrum she did not trust. One of his companions leaned in. Alpha, we should be gone. Patrols are thick tonight. Alpha. The word settled like a thrown knife. She stepped in front of him before courage failed and pitched her voice low. I need moon witness. His attention sharpened with unnerving speed. Up close, his eyes were a dark brown that hid more than they revealed. From whom? Council bounty riders, Riverfort claim. She swallowed. I can trade information. I only need sanctuary until dawn. The younger wolves exchanged a look of pure alarm. The scarred man did not move. You are asking for a false mate declaration. Yes. That carries legal debt. I know. You do not know, he said softly. Not in this territory. A shout broke across the yard. There. Gray cloak. Stop her. Kestra's enforcer had seen her. Ophelia turned her head and found 3 bounty wolves pushing through the crowd, hands on hilts, faces bright with the certainty of ownership. People stepped aside quickly. No one challenged council hunters in open market unless they wanted audits and burned licenses. She faced the scarred alpha again and let the last of her pride fall away. If you refuse, do it now so I can run while it still matters. For the first time, emotion crossed his face, brief and hard to name. Grief, maybe, cut with fury. Name, Ophelia Valewood. He held her gaze for one long beat, then nodded once, decision made like a door slamming shut. Lucian Stoneheart. The name stirred nothing in memory, which meant she had spent too long in cages. One of the younger wolves hissed under his breath. Lucian, this is reckless. Lucian did not look away from her. Open the witness ring. The brazier attendants moved at once, either from loyalty or fear. The crowd shifted outward, forming a rough circle around carved stones where old oath marks glimmered through soot. Bounty riders accelerated toward them, cursing, but market guards crossed spears at the boundary line, invoking neutral ground until declaration was heard. Rain tapered to mist. Every sound seemed to narrow. Lucian stepped into the ring and extended his hand, palm up, a formal invitation and a final chance to retreat. If you enter, the law binds us both until dawn hearing. No lies inside the fire. Ophelia's entire body hurt. Her clothes clung cold to her skin, her hands were numb, her throat raw, and somewhere under all of it the ledger pressed against her ribs like a second spine. She looked at his scar, at the stillness he wore like discipline, at the wolves closing in beyond the guards, and chose. She stepped into the ring and placed her wrist in his hand. Heat struck. Not surface warmth, not friction, but a fierce current that threaded through her veins as if someone had poured molten wire under her skin. Ophelia gasped and nearly lost her footing. Lucian's fingers convulsed around her pulse point. He drew a sharp breath like a man hit in the chest. Moonlight broke through the clouds in a single pale shaft and hit the witness stones. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then amber bled into his irises, brightening from human brown to predatory gold as something ancient looked out through his eyes, and the world narrowed to the hand that held hers, and the bond waking between them with terrifying certainty. The noise of the market dropped away to a distant roar while the witness fire leapt high, silver sparks twisting around their joined wrists. Ophelia felt the surge travel up her arm, across her shoulders, down her spine in a pattern too deliberate to be panic. Every lash scar on her back burned, then cooled. A phantom ache opened at the base of her throat, tender and hungry, as though her body recognized a touch that had not yet happened. No, she thought, present and ragged inside her own skull. No, this is law work, this is strategy, this is one night. I do not belong to anyone. I am not asking fate for anything. Dawn comes, and I walk away alive. That is the bargain. That is all this is. Her pulse told a different story. Lucian's expression had gone stripped and raw, control fraying in plain sight. He leaned closer by a fraction, nostrils flaring, as if scent itself had become revelation. When he said her name, it broke halfway through. Ophelia. She had known men who touched like they were taking inventory. She had known men who touched like punishment. This was neither. His grip remained careful even as power shook through him, thumb pressed lightly to the inside of her wrist, as though reassuring himself she was real. Around them, witnesses murmured in rising waves. Gold flare. By the moon, did you see? Stoneheart found his... Lucian turned his head toward the crowd, and command dropped into his voice like iron. Silence. The word cracked across the ring. Quiet followed. Kestra's enforcer shoved past a guard to the boundary line, face flushed with outrage. That woman is bonded Riverfort labor and charged with theft of state property. Stand aside. Lucian did not release Ophelia. You may file claim at dawn. She does not survive to dawn. The enforcer snapped. Seize her now. He stepped forward until firelight carved harsh lines along his scar. Cross witness stone and test that order. His two companions moved to flank the ring, hands near blades, clearly prepared to bleed for this unknown woman their alpha had claimed with one touch. Ophelia felt the shift in the yard as pack loyalties, market laws, and council authority collided. The tension was no longer hers alone. It had become political, lethal, and very public. The enforcer bared her teeth. You are choosing a runaway over council peace. Lucian's gaze went colder than river water. I am choosing law. You can still do the same. She spat near the stones and signaled her riders back with visible effort. Dawn hearing, she hangs after. Dawn hearing, Lucian agreed. The riders withdrew to the edge of torchlight, watchful as carrion crows. Only when they were out of immediate striking distance did Lucian look down at Ophelia again, and the feral brightness in his eyes softened into something that unsettled her more than threat. Recognition, relief, a grief-deep wonder she had no defense against. His voice dropped so only she could hear. I agreed to shelter a stranger for one night. The bond pulsed once between them, bright and undeniable. He swallowed, jaw tightening. The moon did not ask what I agreed to. Ophelia tried to pull her wrist free, testing herself as much as him. The moment their skin began to part, the ache at her throat sharpened and a low sound escaped her before she could stop it, half pain, half protest. Lucian stilled instantly and eased his grip without letting go, giving her space while staying connected, as if he understood the boundary she had not spoken. Fear rose first, then anger at the fear. Then, beneath both, a startling thread of longing so clean it felt dangerous. She had crossed a fire line to buy hours and walked straight into a bond stories called sacred and courts called binding. If this could be weaponized, she had handed her enemies a blade. If it was true, she had found home in the one place she had never dared look. She lifted her chin because trembling would not save her. We still have terms, Alpha Stoneheart. A shadow of dry humor touched his mouth despite everything. For tonight, call me Lucian. Lucian, then. Her voice steadied. Sanctuary until dawn. No more. His eyes held hers, gold still bright, wolf close to the surface and leashed by sheer will. Sanctuary until dawn, he said. The witness fire snapped, throwing sparks into the mist like stars torn loose from the sky, and neither of them pretended dawn would end what had already begun. Lucian released her wrist only when they crossed the inner yard and the market noise thinned behind shuttered stalls. He guided her toward a long stone storehouse at the edge of the outpost, one hand hovering near her back without touching, as if he had learned that sudden contact could feel like a trap. Two Stoneheart sentries took position at the doors the moment they arrived, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the lane where council riders still waited in the dark. Inside, the room was spare and clean, stacked grain crates against one wall, a trestle table, 3 travel cots, a banked hearth throwing low heat that smelled of pine resin, practical, temporary, built for people expecting attack. Lucian turned to his men. No one enters without my word. The taller one, a blunt-faced wolf with rain still dripping from his braid, glanced at Ophelia and lowered his voice. If council demands inspection, we cannot deny them and keep market protections. Then they can demand? Lucian said. They will be answered. The second wolf looked younger, tense enough to vibrate. Is she truly your mate? A pause stretched. Lucian's gaze flicked to Ophelia and back. She is under my protection. That is sufficient. Both men nodded and left, closing the door behind them. The iron latch dropped into place with a decisive click. Ophelia stood near the hearth, every muscle braced. The room was suddenly too quiet. She could feel her heartbeat in the raw skin of her wrists, in the ache at her throat, in the place under her ribs where the stolen ledger cut against her with each breath. She had bartered for legal shelter, not intimacy, but she knew enough of pack customs to understand what most alphas expected once a claim was spoken under moon witness. Lucian took one step back from her, deliberately widening the space between them. You can have the corner cot nearest the wall. It is warmest. She stared at him, not understanding for a moment. Your cot? Yes. Where do you sleep? Chair. Floor. I have options. He crossed to a chest, pulled out folded winter furs, and set them on the mattress with precise, careful movements. You do not have many tonight. The restraint in that sentence landed harder than command would have. She felt her shoulders drop by a fraction, then stiffen again when he reached for a clay jar on the shelf. What is that? She asked. Healer's salve, yarrow, pine pitch, silver leaf. He held up his free hand, palm open. You are shivering. River water and stress can send the body into shock. Your back is bleeding through the shirt seam. She had not noticed until he said it. Now the sting of reopened scar tissue lit along her spine. I can do it myself, she said too quickly. I believe you. His voice stayed level. You should not have to, if you do not want to. He waited. Did not move closer, did not crowd the answer out of her. Inside her, old reflexes collided. Refuse help and keep control. Accept help and risk the debt that always came after. I am standing in a locked room with an alpha whose scent is already under my skin, and every lesson I learned says kindness is a prelude to cost. If I turn my back, I am giving him my blind side, the side people take when they want to remind you what you are. But he asked. He keeps asking. No one in the fort asked. They took, then renamed taking his order. I can keep bleeding because fear feels familiar, or I can make one new choice and survive this hour differently. If this is a trap, I will know soon. If it is not, I need to stop treating mercy like a blade. She exhaled slowly. Tell me before you touch me. His expression did not change, but something in his posture eased, like a tightened cable slackening. I will. She sat on the edge of the cot and turned, fingers clumsy as she loosened the ties of her shirt. Lucian knelt behind her, setting the salve near the hearth to warm it. When he spoke again, his tone was low and steady, the cadence of someone keeping both of them anchored. I am touching your shoulder now. His fingertips were calloused, warm from the fire. He peeled damp cloth from torn skin with patient care, pausing whenever she hissed. He named each movement before he made it. Salve, bandage wrap, tie at the side. No surprises. The intimacy of it unsettled her more than hunger ever had, not because it was sensual, because it was gentle. You are very practiced, she said, voice rough. I learned when there was no healer left to call. He tied the final knot and sat back on his heels. Firelight cut across the scar on his face, catching old pain in the angle of his mouth. Lachlan's raid took our den 6 winters ago. We buried 32 in 1 week. After that, I swore I would not bind myself to anyone I could not protect. The words were plain, but grief lay under them like deep water. She turned to face him. And tonight. Tonight I broke that vow in a market ring full of witnesses. A humorless breath left him. Either the moon has a harsh sense of timing, or I do. He rose, crossed to the table, and poured broth from an iron pot into a wooden bowl. Steam curled up, rich with barley and marrow. He brought it to her, waited until she took it, then moved to the door and drew a chair across the threshold. What are you doing? She asked. Guarding the only entrance. You have sentries outside. They guard the hall. He settled into the chair, forearms on his knees, watching the latch. I guard you. The broth was hot enough to hurt her tongue. She drank anyway, swallowing against a sudden sting behind her eyes that had nothing to do with heat. After several quiet minutes, she said, I expected fangs and got nursing. A faint, unexpected smile touched his scarred mouth. If it balances your expectations, I can schedule fangs for tomorrow. The laugh escaped her before she could stop it, small and rusty from disuse. It startled them both. For one breath, the room felt less like a siege and more like shelter. An hour before moonset, wind rattled the shutters and then went still. Ophelia finished the broth and set the empty bowl aside. Lucian had not looked at her as property once. Not in the ring. Not here. He looked at her like a person carrying damage and secrets, and as if neither disqualified her from being defended. She touched the ledger hidden under her inner wrap, feeling the worn edge through cloth. You said no lies inside witness fire, she murmured. I did. There is a reason they want me dead by dawn. She met his gaze across the dim room. I stole records from Riverfort. Council records. They do not just prove grain fraud. They name families erased on purpose. His stillness sharpened. Show me. She untied the waxed thread with numb fingers and pulled the ledger free. Even now, handing it over felt like stepping off a cliff. Lucian took the book with reverence, not greed, flipping pages carefully near the hearth. As he read, the lines of his face hardened. Royal Registry marks, he said softly. Old Valley seals under council overwax. You can read them. I was taught by a mother who believed books were weapons when used correctly. He closed the ledger, jaw tight. If this is authenticated, it can collapse half the tribunal's current authority. If it is ignored, she said, I die as a thief and they call it justice. His eyes lifted to hers, amber brightening at the edges though he stayed fully human. You do not die tomorrow. The certainty in his voice should have sounded arrogant. It sounded like an oath. He handed it back, and she rewrapped it beneath her coat. She lay down eventually, still half-dressed, knife within reach under the fur. Lucian remained at the door, wakeful and silent. She slept in fragments, waking each time boots crossed the outer hall. Every time she opened her eyes, he was still there. By first light, hard knocks thundered against the outer door and shattered the fragile calm. Stoneheart sentries opened to 3 visiting alphas wrapped in travel cloaks edged with frost. They entered without waiting to be welcomed, bringing the cold with them. Ophelia recognized none of them, but authority clung to their posture like scent. Old pack leaders, men used to being obeyed. The tallest, a silver-haired wolf with a broken nose and heavy council rings, fixed on Lucian first and Ophelia second. You choose strange causes before breakfast. Lucian stood from the threshold chair in one smooth motion. State yours, Alpha Merrick. Merrick's gaze slid over Ophelia with open contempt. That female is listed Riverfort bond labor, escaped and accused of state theft. Harboring her invite sanction on all allied routes. Release her and we discuss grain protections as planned. The second alpha, lean and hawk-eyed, added, Lachlan offered terms at Dawn Bell. Surrender the fugitive, withdraw your border petition, and his caravans feed your winter camps. There it was, stripped clean, trade her for grain, trade her for peace. Ophelia felt the room tilt, old shame rising hot and familiar. Fugitive, labor stock, a burden measured against sacks of barley. Lucian moved one step, placing himself fully between her and the 3 alphas. Moon Witness Sanctuary remains active until formal review. You know the law. Merrick snorted. Do not recite shrine law to me like I am a pup. Sanctuary does not erase ownership claims. People are not ownership, Lucian said. The third alpha, younger and broad through the chest, glanced at Ophelia and reached as if to seize her wrist and prove the point. Then she can wait outside while men decide what— He never finished. Lucian's hand caught his forearm mid-grab with a crack of impact. His pupils narrowed. The predator surfaced behind his face, canines lengthening, claws extending in a controlled half-shift that transformed restraint into unmistakable threat. Touch her again, Lucian said, voice gone low and dangerous. And you leave this hall missing the hand. Stoneheart sentries lunged forward, blades half-drawn, but Lucian snapped without looking away from the visitors. Stand down, all of you. His wolves froze, shocked. Merrick's brows rose. You dismiss your own guard while threatening allied alphas. I remove their liability. Lucian released the younger alpha with a shove and spread his hand slightly, showing everyone exactly where blame would land. Any violation here is mine, my order, my consequence. Not theirs, not the pack's. The calculation in the room changed. He was giving witnesses a legal line impossible to misread. If counsel punished this defiance, it would strike him first. Merrick studied him for a long moment, then looked at Ophelia with new wariness. What is she to you, that you spend political blood this freely? Lucian answered without hesitation. The one under my protection. It was not a possessive claim, not mine, not property. Under my protection, spoken like duty chosen in daylight. Silence pressed in after that, dense and charged. Then Merrick clicked his tongue in disgust. You are gambling your people's winter on a woman you met in a storm. No, Lucian said. I am gambling on law meaning what we keep saying it means. The 3 alphas exchanged glances. None liked him. None wanted to be first to test him in a closed hall with witnesses present and rights still active. At last, Merrick stepped back toward the door. Dawn review at the stone court then. If this collapses into feud, it stains your crest. Lucian's claws retracted as he forced the shift down. I am aware. They left in a gust of cold and hostility, boots hard against the boards. When the door shut, the room felt suddenly enormous. Ophelia realized she had been holding her breath and let it out slowly. Lucian turned to check her, shoulders still tight with banked aggression. Up close, she could see the effort it cost him to leash that fury, to keep it precise instead of wild. No one had ever stood in front of her like that and called the risk his own. She reached into her coat, drew out the ledger, and placed it in his hands without being asked. This is why they are coming, she said. And if we fight them, we fight with the truth. His fingers closed over the worn leather, then over her colder hand where it lingered a second too long. For the first time since the river fort, she let herself keep her hand there. For the first time since the river fort, she let herself keep her hand there, and Lucian did not claim it, did not tighten, only turned his palm so their fingers aligned as if agreement could be held without force. The door opened a heartbeat later. The younger sentry stepped in, breathing hard from a run. Alpha, black seal at the outer gate, Lachlan's crest. Lucian's jaw set. Bring it. The sentry offered a folded strip of thick parchment marked with a wolf head split by a grain stalk, wax pressed so deep it had cracked at the edges. Lucian broke it, read once, then handed it to Ophelia. By order of Lachlan Stoneheart, lawful rootmaster of the Eastern Grain Compact, all trade with the rebel Stoneheart remnant is suspended until surrender of escaped bond laborer Ophelia Valewood, currently harbored under fraudulent mate declaration. Additional review pending for treasonous possession of state records and suspected espionage on behalf of Riverfort dissidents. Stone Court convenes at second bell. Bring female, surrender border petition, and receive winter allotment. Refuse, and your camps eat frost. The script was elegant, almost ceremonial. The threat was not. He controls the grain routes, Ophelia said quietly, though she already understood from Merrick's warning. He can starve whole territories without drawing a blade. Lucian nodded once. He inherited route authority after the old compact fractured. He calls it stewardship. It is extortion with better bookkeeping. He used your crest. Because he still wants my pack under his command, and because shared blood gives him cover when he lies. Lucian took the parchment back and flattened it on the table with 2 fingers, like pinning down a venomous thing. Lachlan Stoneheart is my elder cousin. He survived the massacre that broke us. He also profited from it. Ophelia looked up sharply. Profited how? By arriving late to every aid call and first to every abandoned granary. His voice stayed even, but anger moved beneath it like current under ice. He took protection vows from desperate settlements, then raised tariffs until they could not leave. Wolves call him practical. I call him patient. Outside, the market bell rang once, thin in the cold morning air. Lucian turned to his sentry. Send Corin to the archive quarter. I want Master Ilrin, the neutral seal reader, at Stone Court before second bell. Send Mara to the North Lane for sworn copies of this notice and witness signatures that it was delivered under threat. Go now. The sentry hesitated. If Lachlan's men are already on the lanes. Then move faster than they expect, Lucian said. When the door shut again, silence pressed close, broken only by the fire settling in the hearth. He called the declaration fraudulent, Ophelia said. If he can make that stick, witness law collapses and I am property by noon. He will try 3 angles at once, Lucian replied. First, discredit you as stolen labor. Second, paint me as unstable and lawless so allies abandon us. Third, bury your ledger under procedure until no one remembers what it proves. She touched the leather at her ribs as if checking that truth still had weight. He already added espionage. He needs treason language to justify immediate execution if tribunal turns against him. The words should have hollowed her out. Instead, they sharpened her. I am not surprised. I am tired, cold, and still shaking, but not surprised. Men like Bran killed by memo. Men like Kestra killed by seal. Men like Lachlan kill by law and call it order. If I hand this ledger over and trust process, I disappear in a cleaner room. If I run, Lucian's people starve for sheltering me. If I stay, I could burn every bridge he has left. I want one morning where my body is only my own and no one weighs me against grain. Yet here I am with the kingdom's bones tied under my coat, and a bond I never asked for pulsing every time he stands too close. I am afraid, but fear is old weather. I know how to move in it. What I do not know is how to be defended without becoming a debt. What I want, right now, is simple and terrifying: to be believed before I am buried. Lucian crossed to the wash basin, rinsed blood from a nick along his knuckle where he had caught the other alpha's arm, and said, "Look at me." She did. "We go to Stone Court together. You do not stand behind me as evidence. You stand beside me as witness." A small, incredulous breath left her. "You think they will allow that?" "I think they will object. Then we make them do it anyway." Their gazes held. The pull between them had shifted from the wildfire shock of the witness ring into something lower and steadier, a live thread that tightened each time either of them chose honesty over caution. She noticed absurd details because noticing kept her grounded: the damp edge of his sleeve where rain had not fully dried, the faint tremor in his left hand when he thought she could not see, the way he gave her space and somehow remained close enough to anchor her breathing. By the time the sun cleared the eastern palisade, the outpost square had transformed into a tribunal theater. Stone benches filled with traitors, scouts, pack delegates, and opportunists who smelled political blood. The witness brazier now burned with formal blue-white flame beneath carved moon sigils. At the far side, Lachlan Stoneheart waited with 6 armored wolves in Rootmaster colors, iron gray and wheat gold. He was taller than Lucian by a fraction, clean-shaven, silver threaded early at his temples, cloak clasped with old Stoneheart iron polished bright enough to catch light. Beauty wielded like a weapon. He smiled when Ophelia and Lucian approached, and the smile never reached his eyes. "Cousin?" Lachlan said, as if greeting at a family feast. "You look exhausted. Governance does that." Lucian did not return the smile. "State your claim." Lachlan's gaze moved to Ophelia with exquisite courtesy that made her skin crawl. "Ophelia Valewood, Riverfort bond worker. Missing labor tag, forged passage, theft of classified materials, collusion with anti-council elements. A tragic case, really. Clever girls are often used by men who promise rescue." "I used myself," Ophelia said. One brow lifted, amused. "Did you? Then perhaps you also forged these." He signaled. A clerk stepped forward and unrolled 3 documents on a portable board: a purchase registry naming Ophelia as transferable labor asset, an alleged confession stating she had accepted payment to steal and alter records, and a courier report claiming she had attempted contact with rival packs to sell state secrets. Each bore seals. Each looked convincing at a glance. Ophelia felt the ground tilt, not from doubt, but from recognition of craft. Whoever had made them understood archive style, margin notation, ink aging, witness placement. Lucian's voice dropped to a dangerous softness. "You brought forgeries into Mooncourt." Lachlan spread his hands. "Strong accusation from a male who performed a theatrical mate claim in a public market to shield contraband. I brought evidence. You brought heat." Murmurs surged through the crowd. A tribunal speaker in bone-white robes struck the stone with a staff. "Order. All claims heard in sequence. Routemaster Lachlan petitions immediate transfer of the accused pending verification." "No transfer," Lucian said. The speaker frowned. You are not presiding. No, Lucian replied. I am invoking co-equal challenge under witness law and requesting seal authentication before custody ruling. Lachlan laughed lightly. By all means, call your experts. Lucian looked toward the north lane. Empty. No Master Ilren. No Mara. No Corin. A cold line of understanding traced down Ophelia's spine. He blocked them. Lachlan tilted his head. I did not hear that. Lucian's shoulders went rigid. Where are my messengers? Perhaps delayed, Lachlan said. Roads are unreliable. A Stoneheart runner burst from the crowd then, cloak torn at the shoulder, face bruised and furious. He dropped to one knee beside Lucian. Corin and Mara were detained at Grain Checkpoint 2. Route guards cited tariff violation and held them pending review. Ilren refused release without counsel writ. The tribunal speaker stiffened. Detaining witnesses before hearing is interference. Lachlan did not even blink. Detaining smugglers is duty. The runner spat blood to the side. He had your writ ready before we arrived. Pressure built in the square like storm charge. Traitors shifted. Guards tightened grips on spear shafts. The blue flame in the brazier jumped as wind cut through the open ring. Then Kestra's enforcer stepped from Lachlan's line with a fresh bundle of papers and presented them to the tribunal speaker. Supplemental order from Riverfort Council Chamber, she announced. Given suspicion of espionage, accused may be lawfully separated from declared mate for interrogation without violating Moon Sanctuary provisions. Ophelia felt Lucian's attention snap toward the papers so hard she could almost hear the change in him. They are rewriting Sanctuary in real time, she said under her breath. They planned this before dawn, he answered. The speaker read, hesitated, then read again. This order bears emergency authority stamp. Lucian took one step forward. Read the signatory aloud. The speaker did. Auditor Kestra of Riverfort. Countersigned Routemaster Lachlan Stoneheart. Lachlan inclined his head with polished regret. The law adapts when threats evolve. Ophelia did not realize she was trembling until Lucian's hand found the inside of her wrist, exactly where the bond had first ignited. Not gripping. Grounding. The thread between them steadied, warm and bright. And with it came a pulse of his control under strain, his fury leashed for her sake in front of hundreds of watching eyes. At the edge of the ring, 3 council wardens advanced carrying restraint chains etched with moon script, the kind used for high-risk detainees. Not iron manacles for laborers, public symbols for enemies of state. The tribunal speaker lifted a shaking hand. Pending authentication of contested documents and emergency order review, the court authorizes temporary separation for questioning only. No physical coercion permitted under Moon law. Accused will be returned by nightfall for final hearing. No, Lucian said, voice rough now, closer to a growl than speech. Lachlan looked almost kind. Do not make this uglier, cousin. If you resist lawful detention, your pack is declared rogue before sundown. Ophelia stared at the approaching chains and understood the trap in full. Take her now under clean legal language, isolate her, break narrative, produce confession, return a body of evidence if not a body at all. Lucian could fight and lose everything or submit and risk losing her. One warden reached for her arm. Lucian moved, not striking yet, but stepping into that line with predatory precision, claws just beginning to edge from his fingertips as the crowd surged forward to witness which law would break first. One warden reached for her arm. Lucian moved, not striking yet, but stepping into that line with predatory precision, claws just beginning to edge from his fingertips as the crowd surged forward to witness which law would break first. The warden flinched back, chains clattering against stone, spears lowered all around the ring. Lachlan's wolves shifted their weight in practiced formation, not a panic line but an execution corridor waiting for command. Stand down! The tribunal speaker shouted, voice cracking on the second word. Stand down, all parties. No one obeyed. Lachlan took a single, almost lazy step to the side, angling for clear sight of Ophelia beyond Lucian's shoulder. You are out of options, cousin. Yield her and keep your camps. Resist and bury your pack with her. Lucian's answer came low and lethal. Try to take her. The wardens tightened their grip on the chains and moved again, this time spreading to flank rather than front. A legal maneuver dressed as caution. If they clipped her from both sides, they could call it restraint, not seizure. Ophelia saw it, saw also the exact moment Lucian calculated he could break 2 wrists and still reach her before a third chain locked. If he did, Lachlan won. I can feel the bond burning between us, hot as a live wire. And his rage is not wild rage. It is measured, sharpened for protection, which makes it more dangerous in a court built by cowards. If he spills blood first, they call him rogue and never hear me speak. If I let them chain me, I vanish into a room with no witnesses and no dawn. I have one opening, and it is narrow as a needle eye. Speak now, or be erased. Ophelia stepped around Lucian before anyone could block her and raised her voice until it carried to the back benches. I invoke trial by moon. The square went still in ripples, like wind flattening tall grass. Lachlan laughed once, short and contemptuous. Denied. Trial by moon requires sovereign petition or Alpha Council vote. She has neither. She has blood challenge, Lucian said immediately, turning half toward the speaker without taking his attention from Lachlan's line. Contested lineage, contested law, contested custody. Right is valid under Fifth Covenant. The speaker's mouth tightened. Fifth Covenant is dormant custom. Dormant is not repealed, Lucian said. Lachlan's smile thinned. How convenient. You discover antiquity only when cornered. Ophelia reached inside her coat and took out the ledger. Gasps moved through the crowd at the sight of old royal leather and half-scraped seals. She held it high enough that everyone could see the broken wax, the wear at the spine, the pages that had outlived regimes. Then let Moonlaw decide, she said. If I lie, chain me and end it. The tribunal speaker hesitated long enough for fear to spread. Then he struck his staff on stone. Right petition acknowledged. Move to the sacred circle. The sacred circle sat only 20 paces beyond the witness brazier, older than the market itself, a ring of flat black stones carved with runes nearly worn smooth by weather and blood. People stumbled back to clear a path. Lucian stayed at Ophelia's side, close enough for the bond to steady her pulse, far enough to show he was not steering her. Lachlan followed, posture composed, but his eyes had gone hard and bright with calculation. At the circle's edge, the speaker called protocol in a shaking cadence. Petitioner presents evidence. Blood verifies standing. Counterclaim may answer. Ophelia did not wait for courage. She took the small knife from her boot, drew the edge across her palm, and pressed her hand to the center rune. Pain came first, then light. Silver fire surged through the carved channels beneath her skin and raced outward across the stones, igniting sigils no one had seen active in a generation. One by one they flared to life around her feet, crown marks and lineage knots and moon glyphs that turned the black ring into a living map. Wind lifted her hair. The blue tribunal flame bent toward her as if pulled. The crowd dropped to their knees in uneven waves. Lachlan did not kneel. He stared at the lit runes, and for the first time she saw fear beneath his polish. The speaker's staff slipped from his fingers and hit stone with a crack. By the old crown, he whispered. Royal sigils respond. Ophelia's blood kept feeding the pattern, silver threading over her palm, sealing rather than spilling. She opened the ledger with her uninjured hand and turned to the marked page she had memorized in the dark archive. Read this line, she said, thrusting it toward the speaker. He took it reluctantly, eyes moving fast, then slowing, then widening. Infant female, Valley Line collateral branch, transferred under protective alias after purge event. Seal witness 3 signatures. His voice shook. Alias designation Valewood. Murmurs exploded. Names flew. Oaths. Denials. Lachlan snapped. Forgery in older ink is still forgery. Ophelia turned toward him, and when she spoke again her voice carried farther than it should have. Not loud but resonant, as if the runes themselves amplified truth and stripped ornament. Then let your wolves speak. He bared his teeth. They owe me oath. Under moon blood they owe truth first. She lifted her glowing hand and pointed at Lachlan's line. Wrote Captain Joran, Clerk Thane, Warden Pell. Step forward and testify under oath. 3 wolves jolted as if struck from within. One tried to step back and could not. Another clutched his throat, eyes wide, then stumbled into the circle's edge and dropped to one knee. The third, a narrow-shouldered clerk with ink on his cuffs, started to cry before he spoke. Lachlan roared, "Hold your ground!" None of them could. Joran spoke first, voice raw. We detained Stoneheart messengers at Checkpoint 2 on pre-written writ, issued last night before hearing call. Pell followed, shaking. Emergency separation order drafted at Grain Hall, not Riverfort. Kestra seal pressed from Routemaster custody box. The clerk Thane squeezed his eyes shut. Confession document fabricated from labor intake template. Signature copied from old ration receipts. We were told the female would be declared spy and executed before moonrise, so no appeal could be filed. The square erupted into shouting. Lucian did not move from Ophelia's side. Through the bond, she felt his fury sharpen and then settle into focus. No longer a blaze, a blade. Within the space of a few breaths, Corin and Mara were dragged in from the lane by Stoneheart sentries and neutral traders, bruised but upright, wrists marked by rope burns. Corin held a crumpled transit writ above his head and shouted, "Time stamped before dawn." He planned witness interference before petition was filed. The speaker snatched the writ, read, and turned a stricken face toward Lachlan. "Is this yours?" Lachlan's composure finally cracked. He ripped the Routemaster clasp from his cloak and flung it to the stones. "You want truth." His voice rose, feral now. "Truth is settlements need grain more than they need law. Truth is weak packs follow whoever feeds them. Truth is, crowns are stories told to make hungry wolves kneel." By the time the second bell began to toll over the square, the tribunal had become a battlefield waiting for the first leap. Lachlan did not wait for verdict. He shifted in a violent snap of muscle and bone, human frame dropping into massive wolf form with iron-gray fur and crest armor strapped across his shoulders. He launched straight for Ophelia's throat. Lucian met him mid-air. The impact slammed both wolves across the runestones, claws scraping sparks. Spectators scattered from the benches. Wardens yelled for perimeter lines that no one held. Joran and Pell crawled clear on elbows, choking on dust. Lachlan twisted under Lucian's weight and raked for his flank, forcing separation. Ophelia felt the strike through the mate thread like a hot tear along her own ribs. Not injury detail, sensation and alarm, enough to stagger her. "Stay upright. Do not freeze. He cannot fight and guard your blind side while 36 panicked wolves crowd the ring. Move." She planted her feet inside the lit sigils and pulled breath deep into her chest. The runes answered, light racing from stone to blood to air until silver strands began to coil around her forearms like living chains. Lachlan feinted right, then drove for Lucian's neck. Lucian turned to absorb, half step late. "Left flank now," Ophelia commanded. The bond snapped tight between them. Lucian pivoted exactly as she called, jaws catching Lachlan's shoulder harness instead of throat. Metal screamed. Lachlan wrenched free, but the move exposed the crest plate at his chest. Ophelia drove both hands forward. Rune light lanced across the circle and struck the plate dead center. The forged authority symbols etched into Lachlan's armor flared, cracked, and shattered into molten fragments that hissed out on the stones. Without crest protection, he lost legal immunity and magical warding in the same breath. He lunged again, slower now, rage outrunning strategy. Lucian hit him from the side and bore him down hard. Ophelia flicked her wrist and the silver strands became chains, whipping around Lachlan's hind legs and torso, cinching tight with each thrash until he was pinned between rune bindings and Lucian's crushing hold. Lachlan's wolf form shuddered and snapped back to human under strain, face bloodless, hair plastered to his brow, chest heaving beneath broken straps. Lucian remained half-shifted over him, canines bared, amber gaze feral and fixed. Even trapped, Lachlan spat up at Ophelia with contempt that had outlived caution. "You were a servant pretending at queenship." Ophelia stepped to the edge of his reach, silver fire still burning along her palm, and met his stare without flinching. "No, I was hidden. Now I am named." She looked to the tribunal speaker. "State lawful sentence." The speaker swallowed hard. "By witnessed attack during blood trial, by forged seal conspiracy, by attempted unlawful execution, Lachlan Stoneheart is stripped of root claim and alpha standing. Sentence is alpha ending, immediate, under witness." Lachlan laughed once, broken and bitter. "Cousin, you always did let conscience starve you." Lucian's voice came out rough, almost unrecognizable. "Not tonight." He closed his jaws at Lachlan's throat and held. No spectacle, no cruelty, only finality witnessed by law. When Lucian released, Lachlan was still. Claim ended on sacred stone. Silence hit the square like snowfall. Then the speaker, voice unsteady but clear, raised both hands. "Judgment executed. Rote claim revoked. Forged orders void. Grain compact falls to emergency redistribution under tribunal and blood right signatory." One by one, Lachlan's surviving wolves lowered themselves to their knees before the lit circle, heads bowed toward Ophelia and Lucian together. Joran went first, then Pell, then the armored line that had come to enforce surrender. Around them, traitors and delegates followed in widening rows until the whole square bent in reluctant, undeniable acknowledgement. The silver runes dimmed to a steady glow beneath Ophelia's feet. Her cut palm had sealed completely, leaving only a pale line. Lucian turned toward her, chest rising hard, claws retracting by degrees as he forced the wolf back under control. Through the bond she felt exhaustion, relief, and a fierce, reverent certainty that matched her own. For the first time since the river fort marked her for disposal, no chain reached for her. The law had seen her face and spoken her name. The law had seen her face and spoken her name. And still Ophelia's hands shook, as if her body had not yet trusted the verdict. Silver light faded from the stones in slow breaths. Around the circle, kneeling wolves waited for the next command, uncertain where to place their allegiance now that old power had fallen quiet at their feet. Lucian looked at the tribunal speaker, then at the crowd, and finally back to her. He stepped out of the broken harness straps and knelt on both knees in front of Ophelia, not as victor, and not as alpha above her, but with his throat bared in full offering. Gasps moved through the square. An alpha did not expose vulnerability in public unless he meant every witness to remember it. His voice was rough from shift and battle, yet steady. "Ophelia Valewood, blood-named heir of the Valley line, I asked for one night and received a truth I cannot set aside. I will not bind you with debt, fear, or law. Choose me in daylight, not desperation. Choose me only if the word is yours." The ache at the base of her throat pulsed in answer, tender and fierce. She saw the cut on his knuckles from the hall, the strain in his shoulders, the restraint that had defined every touch since the witness fire. He had stood between her and chains, but he had never stood between her and choice. She sank to her knees across from him until their breath mingled in the cold air. I choose you in daylight, she said. No bargain, no borrowed dawn. I choose you because you saw me before the crown did. Something softened in his face that she had not known he was still holding closed. She turned her head, bearing the curve where neck met shoulder. Mark me, Lucian. He lifted one hand and paused a hair from her skin. May I? Yes. His mouth found the place in a reverent press first, a promise before claim. Then his teeth pierced. Pain flashed bright and clean, sharp enough to steal breath, but the bond opened instantly around it, heat flooding through the hurt until it became a deep, spreading warmth that reached her ribs, her spine, her palms. Gold raced under her skin like dawn crossing water. She felt him at the same time she felt herself. His control, his relief, his grief for everyone he had buried, and his astonished joy that she was here, alive, answering him. The old numbness she had carried for years cracked apart. A sound left her, half sob, half laugh, and his arm came around her waist to hold her steady without caging her. His lips moved against the mark, sealing it. The thread between them locked with a low, resonant certainty that seemed to hum in the stones beneath their knees. Mine, he whispered. Not ownership, but vow. She touched his cheek, turned him gently, and answered, Yours. Then she slid her hand behind his neck and drew him closer until his pulse beat strong against her mouth. His head tipped in invitation, no hesitation, no command. Mark me back, he said. She did. Her bite landed where neck met shoulder, less force than his, but true. He inhaled sharply and shuddered once as the claim took hold. Heat surged again, this time moving both directions, silver and gold interlacing through the bond until she could not tell where one current ended and the other began. The pain transformed fast, not erased, transmuted into fierce belonging, into recognition so profound it steadied every trembling place in her. He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, breath uneven. Mate. The word settled through her like a bell tone. Mate, she echoed. Around them, the square dropped to complete silence. Then the tribunal speaker knelt and struck fist to chest. Witnessed and accepted. Reciprocal claim, complete under moon law. The sound broke whatever held the crowd motionless. One by one, wolves rose only to bow, not to Lachlan's fallen crest, but to the bond sealed in front of them. Merrick stepped forward first among the allied alphas, gaze unreadable for one long moment. Then he dipped his head to Ophelia. I was wrong this morning, he said, about worth, about law, about you. Then stand right now, she replied. By late afternoon, the tribunal hall filled with ink, wax, and the hard scrape of chairs dragged close to one table. Master Ilrin arrived under neutral guard at last, cloak torn where checkpoint wolves had tried to hold him, and set his seal reader case down with visible fury. He authenticated each piece in full view of the court. Lachlan's black seal threat notice, the forged confession, the fabricated transfer registry, the emergency separation order stamped from stolen custody wax, and Corrin's transit writ with pre-dawn timestamp proving witness interference. When Ilren finished, he spoke without ornament. Forgery chain is complete and coordinated. These are not clerical errors. These are instruments of unlawful execution. Thane repeated his testimony with steadier voice. Joran and Pell confirmed route detentions under written command. Kestra's enforcer, faced with converging proof and oath pressure, admitted she had carried orders she knew were false. By moonrise, warrants were issued for Auditor Kestra and Overseer Bran on charges of conspiracy, unlawful sentencing, and labor falsification. The tribunal clerk recorded that Bran's fever death disposal line had been entered before any infirmary report existed. Procedure turned back on its makers. The stolen ledger never went back into private hands. Ophelia watched Ilrin supervise 3 certified copies, one sealed to tribunal archives, one to Valley Crown records, and one to Stoneheart Stronghold for enforcement actions. The original she placed herself into a cedar case lined in oilcloth, then stamped with her blood-right sign and Lucian's alpha oath. Evidence preserved, not hidden again. At the same table, grain roots were redrawn in ink that smelled of iron and rain. Lachlan's territories were redistributed under emergency compact, with mixed pack escorts assigned to prevent retaliatory seizures. Merrick and the two alphas from Morning signed first, then Corin and Mara, as Stoneheart witnesses. No camp would starve for refusing extortion. No checkpoint could detain legal testimony without immediate sanction. 3 nights later, moonlight silvered the rebuilt Stoneheart courtyard where split stone crests, once mended with thread, now hung recast in iron and silver, joined to the Valley Crown rune in a single standard. Torches lined the walls. Families from ridge camps, market lanes, and former labor holds filled the terraces shoulder to shoulder, not sorted by old rank. Ophelia stood beside Lucian on the central dais in a dark cloak edged with winter fur, her new mark visible above the collar. The tribunal speaker read formal recognition, voice carrying clear in the open air. Ophelia Valewood is acknowledged as High Luna, heir of the Valley Crown and co-ruler of Stoneheart territory. Lucian Stoneheart is acknowledged as Alpha Sovereign. Their reciprocal bond stands uncontested in law and spirit. The pack answered with one unified howl that rolled over the stronghold and down into the valley. After the rite, Ophelia crossed the courtyard to the east gate, where fresh cedar beams framed a new carved sign, Sanctuary House. Inside, cots were already laid with clean blankets, ledger desks set for legal intake, healers' cabinets stocked. Mara handed her the first registry page. At the top, in careful script, it read, "Protected entry for escaped bond servants." "No chains here," Mara said, voice thick. "Never," Ophelia answered, and wrote the first name herself. When the moon climbed high and the stronghold quieted, she found Lucian on the rampart overlooking reopened grain roads, wagon lanterns moving like patient constellations below. He opened his arm and she stepped into it, fitting without effort, bond settled and warm between them. He kissed the mark at her neck. No more borrowed dawns. She smiled against his throat, where her own mark rested over his pulse. Only ours. Below them, their chosen family kept watch over a valley no longer ruled by silence, and ahead of them stretched a future planned in vows instead of fear.